Okay, we're live. All right, welcome back to the relationship series where we talk about matters of the heart and mind. I am Gina Spatero, and my brother is Sam Spatero. And tonight, Sam, do you want to introduce the topic?
Yeah, so tonight our topic is relationship hacks. And one of the hack tonight that we're going to discuss is the communication hack. And I think with any relationship, if you don't have a really good form of communication, everything else just sort of breaks down. And I think really what it comes down to is some very few key things. And that's what happens when we communicate, what is the outcome, and how do we feel? And if it's not a usual positive outcome, it's not where you're, you know, not hesitating to say what you want to feel because of how the other person's going to take it or receive it, because they're afraid they're going to get upset, or they're not really going to just listen wholeheartedly to what you have to say. And I think really what it comes down to is communication is everything. And so I think maybe we can discuss tonight from a male and female perspective, because I actually had a conversation with someone from our last live stream who made a really cool comment. And he says he loved the format of how there's both male and female, and how we're very unbiased with our
Mm-hmm.
opinions. And so I think that's really key here is we can kind of give both men and women some things that they can do from both
Mm-hmm.
male and female perspectives, from both masculine and female natures, and how they all play a direct role in how communication can be a lot more effective, and how that will kind of play out in the form of relationship that you want to create.
I think when you do things like this, people speak from experience, and I think that's why a
Yeah,
lot of people come on these platforms because they come from a place of experience, right? Whether
yeah,
you are completely left or you are completely right. A lot of what comes out is experience based. And I mean, a lot of the things that you and I talk about, definitely we've experienced.
yeah,
However, I think there always has to be a point where when someone comes to you to talk to you about their experience, you have to be non judgmental until you get all the pieces of the puzzle, because there's so many facets to one individual's needs or whatever they're going through. And I think when people say, especially for women, oh, so and so never listens to me, well, how are you communicating, and I think there's, like you said, and I mean, you have taught me some amazing tips. um you have to understand what it actually entails, because it's really is, it's like rewiring all the things that you have been conditioned to think or believe, right? So
well, and I think one of the key thing is let's bring men into this, and I'll speak from a male perspective after doing numerous amounts of research, and someone who had experienced some anxiety disorder years ago, and really trying to understand how the mind works, and how everything is all created in the mind from belief system and your subconscious, which your belief system is formed at a very young age, and how everything is just so interconnected with what you're doing today as an adult, um, especially in a excuse me, in a relationship. And so I think some key things are, especially from a male perspective, is why is men's suicide rate so much higher? Why do men struggle to communicate? And I mean, if we can go back in time, boys, you know, there's so many movements today on female perspectives and male perspectives with the Me Too, and a lot of female movements, and there's a lot of male movements that are getting traction as well. I think really what it comes down to is just what makes us better human beings. I mean, that's really what matters here. And I think from a male perspective, we can go back in time. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday that I coach who's actually going through a really bad depression and who is suicidal and has experienced some anxiety with some of the struggles that they've experienced in their life today. And we took it back to like early childhood moments. And I think if I could go back also, and a lot of men maybe watching this can go back, and it's the same old thing. Suck it up, you're a boy, tough it up, all these strong sort of metaphors that shape your subconscious, which is, as a man, you need to be strong,
mhm.
right? And what we don't understand is being strong is being able to communicate. And I know for myself, I'll speak from my own experiences because, when I speak to people on here, I don't want people to think I'm superhuman or I'm someone that has it all together, because I'm not. I'm just someone who's trying to find ways to become better. Because at the end of the day, you're limited to how much time you're going to spend on this planet. You might as well try to spend it in the most abundant and happy way. And I think for me, a lot of the times what would happen is when I would get in these communicative, situations where I'm ready to express like I had all these roadblocks that just came up and kind of stopped me from saying what I wanted to feel. And I would be disconnected. I would communicate by leaving, getting angry, resentful, maybe tossing some stuff. And maybe there would be a day, 2 days where, I wouldn't speak or say anything or do much. And then I'd come back and just apologize. But I really wouldn't communicate how I was really feeling, because as men, there's this stigma of like, speaking how you feel is a weakness, right? And that stigma has to change. One of the major communication hacks that needs to happen for men, and if you're watching this, vulnerability is a superpower. There's a lot of people out there that are saying to men that vulnerability is a weakness. That's complete bullshit. It's courageous to be vulnerable, because with vulnerability, there can be growth. And not only that, you will gain a greater connection with your wife, your girlfriend, because then she'll know how to serve you in that moment with what you're actually going to need.
Hmm. So here's the whole thing with the notion of vulnerability. I think people confuse vulnerability with a different emotion, because vulnerability essentially means taking a risk, right?
Absolutely.
So I think when people think of vulnerability, they think of like being feminine or whatnot. Like if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be vulnerable all the time.
Yeah.
You have to take risks. You have to, like Brene Brown says, and not very many people are fans. You have to get on the arena and you have to play, because what's the other option, right? So it's like trial and error. But I think that people have a very negative connotation attached to the frame of vulnerability when it comes to masculinity. I mean, do I believe that women and men communicate differently? Of course. Um, we as women will tell you sure tail signs of how we're feeling by our body language, first and foremost. And that's communication in itself,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that as your significant other, understanding how to read that part of communication, how to serve one another in those areas, is definitely a superpower, because I'll tell you this as a female perspective. There's nothing more than a woman wants. If this woman truly adores and loves the man that they're with, is to feel safe. And if she feels safe enough to communicate certain things with her man, like, I mean, that is huge. But I also feel as though there are times where certain communication needs to be nipped, because it could be very toxic, in a sense of, so for example, if someone is dating and it could get to an obsessive component, and there has to be a defining line. Like, I mean, if your partner's going out and you're texting them every 2 seconds, where are you? Who are you with? Da, 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 and you can't let them breathe. Like, how do you deal with that type of communication? Because that comes from an insecurity point of view.
So from a hacking perspective,
Yes. So
because at the end, because at the end of the day,
hack that scenario, because it happens a lot.
so it does happen a lot. And I think one key thing for men out there, after someone who's done tons of research, women a lot of the time don't really say what they mean. They say it indirectly,
Hmm.
right? And so one key thing, I was watching a podcast, and a gentleman stood up and was talking about the struggle he was having with dating and trying to find a girlfriend. And he's talking about a scenario where he's in a car with a girl, and the girl asked him, do you have to pee? And he's like, no, and just kept on driving.
Yeah.
But what he should have asked was, well, do you have to pee? Because girls don't say what they mean. They
Yeah,
say
this is
things
true.
in phrases, and your job is kind of decipher what's really going on and what really needs to happen. So I think, okay, so getting back to the hack, because this is what this is about, so we can stay
Right,
focused here. So how do you hack having a partner who has maybe a low self-esteem,
right, right.
maybe has struggles with trust, and it shows up with those sorts of things? So how do you hack that?
Mhm.
I'm going to talk first and foremost to the person who has those issues.
Right.
So here's what you need to do. First of all, what you have to figure out is where to start.
Mhm.
That's the hack, because this is just not something that happens. Something happened in your life, a vulnerability and experience that made you so uncomfortable and got your reptilian brain on guard to try to protect you and keep you safe. Either it was your own experience or someone else's experience. And so what you really have to do is the very first thing you have to do to hack this, it's so important, is to say, okay, with what I'm about to do, is that going to bring joy to my partner's life?
Mhm.
Is this going to show that I trust them?
Mhm.
Is this going to show that I respect their time with their friends or whatever it is they're going to do by just sending them a message saying, you know what, I love you. You know what, maybe you can share, you know what, I've had some struggles in the past and I'm really trying to work on myself. And because I love you, I know our time is limited on this planet. I want you to have the best of time. Now, that's going to do two things.
Mhm.
One, over time, if that becomes your natural response, you will start to feel so much better about yourself, because it'll naturally bring on a lot of confidence.
Mhm.
Because self-esteem is something you build. It's either
Oh,
you have
100%.
it or you're going to build it. And how are you going to do that? You're going to do that in moments where you're vulnerable.
Mhm.
So taking the risk
Mhm.
is doing something outside of your comfort zone, not to set limitations on somebody, but by setting them free. And by doing that, you set yourself free by creating a higher standard in which you're going to live by.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I've practiced that as well. And it's like there comes a point where you have to understand that you can't control anybody. Anybody. The only person you can control is yourself and your actions and the way you perceive things and the way you deal with things. And I think communication is a huge one. For me, I will openly and honestly speak to my default. In the beginning of my relationship, one of the things that I've always known about myself is that I would just shut down, and I've gotten to the point now where I consciously have to think to myself, okay, I really don't want to repeat the pattern and the stages that I've always repeated in my life. So, how am I going to be better in this moment? Yes, I'm frustrated. Yes, it's valid. But how am I going to fix the problem? Because everything that I had done up until this point didn't work.
That's right.
So for me now, it's like, okay, I know I need a breather. So in moments of frustration for myself, and this is just to help women out there too, or men who may experience the same thing where they don't know what to do when they just put up the wall, shut down, don't talk to anybody. I literally have to say to my significant other, I'm going to go for a quick drive and I'm going to be back. Knowing that I'm not removing myself from the conflict, but I need some time to process. But it will be dealt with because just shutting down is not the answer, first and foremost. But I know for myself, I need some time to think about how I'm going to deal with the conflict
Absolutely,
rationally.
absolutely. So I think you just hit it right on the nose. And if we could talk about it in the context of what does that mean? It's about state.
Yeah.
If you're not in a good state, which state is psychology,
Yeah.
then that's going to really determine the type of emotions you're going to use, which is then going to produce
Yeah.
a very specific sort of thoughts, and that is going to predetermine the type of actions and outcomes that are going to follow. So some key things you can do, especially if you're not in a good state, and you know that if you go ahead with the way you've normally doing, you're going to get those same results. One of the hacks is just, I want you to rate out of 10 where you're at psychologically.
Yeah.
So am I at a 4? Am I at an 8? Am I at a 10? And because of where I'm at, what will the outcome likely be?
Mhm.
And you can literally predetermine what will happen based on understanding where you are psychologically. Am I at a 4? Okay, then if I'm at a 4, why am I thinking that? Well, I'm having feelings of anger, resentment. I want to have a fight, whatever it might be, right? So that's one of the hacks. Rule number 1, I mean, especially if you're not in a good state, you're going to go into something that some of you right now might be watching this, maybe that you're going to regret, might cost you a relationship. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you want to marry this woman or man, whatever it might be. The very first hack you need to do is take a deep breath and pause and rate where you are psychologically. Where am I? Where am I on that scale? And then the second thing you do once you do that is say, okay, if I'm at a 4 of a 5, what are things that I can do right now before I communicate how I feel so that I can get the results that I want from this, which is I want to be able to communicate how I feel. I want them to understand, but I also want to resolve this. And part of a New Year's resolution, if we could take the resolution part out of it and just say it's all about resolving problems, that's what should be at the forefront. And I think if people can get into that mindset, and once it becomes habitual, it completely shifts the whole outcome. And what will happen is you'll shorten the amount of time that you spend fighting. You'll shorten the amount of the time that you're in anxiety, depressed, and feeling a lack of connection, which is not in a state of feeling love. Mm-hmm. And you're going to completely alter the state of your presence in that relationship.
Okay, so I think we have to talk scenario basis because it's not always this way. It's not always printed in black and white. Like, I mean, there's always
I agree.
Scenario. Because remember, I mean, I asked you a question the other day and you kind of explained it to me where I said, because I thought about it, I'm like, do relationships really fail or do people just stop working on them? Because, and you're like, well, some people grow apart, that kind of thing, right? And people's lives change, their ambitions change, their paths change. And I get that completely. So here's my question to you. So if communication is a huge part of it, right? Mm-hmm. At what point, or if you can give people an example, at what point do you deem the communication to be toxic or ill and void, or where you're just like, okay, maybe this is just not the path for these two people?
Okay, so this is a phenomenal point. Fantastic point. And I can use some of my own experiences, some of the experience that I've seen other people do that I've coached. So here's some things that are completely unacceptable. And here's another form of a communication hack. And rule number 1 is this: do not ever tolerate toxic communication, which can be a form of toxic behavior, toxic language, whatever it might be. Do not tolerate it ever. That's rule 1 on the flip side, and right?
What is that?
So I'll give you an example. So back in the beginning of my relationship, I'll use myself as the guinea pig here. Whenever there would be something that upset me in the relationship, I wouldn't talk about it. I would get angry. I would get resentful. I would do things intentionally to try to show her that like I was really hurting inside, but I didn't know how to communicate it. And sometimes I would be distant. I would sleep on the couch. I would do so many things that are really just trying to show her like, hey, you know what? I'm really struggling right now. Mm-hmm. And this is how I'm communicating it, mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm talking about. So say you're with somebody who does that, who doesn't communicate, who swears, who maybe could be physical, who maybe doesn't communicate and constantly distance himself and leaves for hours or days or whatever, and it comes back like everything is fine. And you accept that. Here is communication hack number 1 when it comes to this. Do not tolerate toxic behavior. That's rule number 1. The second thing is, what can you do about it? Mm-hmm. So I think really what it comes down to is if you really love the person, right? Loving someone is trying to set them free from also a bad habit or a pattern, right? Because you got to truly believe they do love me, but they clearly don't have the right tools and how to communicate with what's going on, right? So how do I bring out the best in them in this in this situation, how do I also not tolerate something that's going to make me feel like crap?
Mhm.
Right? So here's what you do. Some things that I've learned is, and my wife is amazing at it right now with me, is she'll actually sit me down and we'll talk. We'll be okay, like what's going on? I notice this is what's going on. I know something is bothering you. And don't worry about how you say it or how you do it. I love you. And I want to solve this with you.
Mhm.
Right. So you take complete judgment out. You take out complete, like, worry about if you're going to be accepted or if there's going to be a lack of love or vulnerability if you share how you're really feeling, because now you've kind of opened that door. Right.
Mhm.
So what you really have to do is say, look, I love you. Um, I really want to try to help you. Let me know what I can do. But I'm going to make it very clear that I will not tolerate being in a relationship like this.
Mhm.
So, what you're going to do by doing that is you're going to force that person to change a toxic behavior. If they do not, then you have a decision to make.
Mhm.
But if you do that, and I know that if you do that, which is doing the right thing, which is probably the thing that you fear because there's going to be, are they going to leave me? But if you do that in which you fear, you set yourself free and you set them free
Mhm.
because you force them to think above and beyond what they've been taught
Mhm.
and what they know to see if there's a better way to get out what they want to speak about.
Mhm.
Right. So that's one thing. I just recently had a coaching call with someone who's in their early 50s and is having a really big hard time struggling. They're suicidal, in a relationship, kids, and had a lot of shifts and changes in their life. And about it was about 4 months ago, they went somewhere together. And on the way home, they're communicating, and their partner just started lashing out at them about all the things that were going on. And they came out from, like they said, they're completely blindsided.
Mhm.
But the person never communicated to their partner what was going on, that they were struggling with depression and anxiety and mental health, with all the things that was going on in their life. And so that night when they got home, they decided to leave
Mm.
and not talk about it until the next morning at like whatever time it was. They came back and the partner was up waiting and they communicated, and they allowed themselves to be vulnerable enough to share the struggles they were going through. And they said, although it hasn't shifted a lot of things that has caused the mental health stuff, it's brought them closer together.
Huh.
They said they've never been more spiritually connected because of the vulnerability that they allowed them to, by saying exactly what was going on, what they were experiencing, what they were thinking, because now they can truly serve them. If someone loves you, you shouldn't fear expressing what's going on.
Mhm.
That fear is just something that was trained a long time ago. That fear that pops up is just your reptilian mind, which is the part of your brain that tries to keep you safe, to try to navigate life as easy and safely as possible. That's not the part of the brain that is going to make you happy.
Mhm.
So, one key hack to understand also when you're communicating, and if you have this constant fear, is to understand this is just a part of your mind, your brain, that's trying to keep you safe. But
Mhm.
it will not make you happy. It will not bring growth to your life, to your relationship. It will not allow you to feel more love and connection. So once you can also understand that, because I think a lot of us don't understand the tools that we've had, like we've discussed this a lot through a lot of the stuff that we've comprised, is you really have to understand the tools we have as a human being, our hearts, our minds, our bodies, how they all play a key role in the things that we do and the things that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
Right. So if you really want to hack this, a really good communication hack is to really just understand, if you're really fearful a lot of expression and doing the right thing, that's just your brain, the part of your brain trying to keep you safe,
Mhm.
but it won't make you happy.
Right.
That's your job. So you have to find at least a couple reasons to say, you know what, I'm scared shitless. I'm really fearful to do this right now.
Mhm.
But what are 3 things that I could do right now that can bring more growth, love, connection to my relationship if I decide to do this and push past the fear?
Yeah. Because I think too, like, I think there's this huge connotation attached to men's inability to express a certain way. But it's funny because there's a lot of women who can't express how they feel or what they want properly, and it comes out very negatively. Shaming, name calling, degrading their loved one or the person that they're with just for convenience sake. Um, and I think when it comes to talking about the toxicity, if other people are hearing it and you're okay sharing that in front of other people about the person you're with, that's huge.
Yeah,
Like, I can only imagine what actually happens in private
that's right.
if they're doing it in front of other people. And I think that's the tolerance part too, and understanding, red flag, like my partner is willing to do this in front of people. And you people really need to decide also, like, what am I willing and how much am I willing to continue to tolerate? Because if it's more than one occasion, I would put that in the toxic category, because I know for me, I've heard it a bunch of times, and I would never in a million years, have someone who I claim to love and degrade them in front of somebody like that.
So I think it happens from both natures, both male and female,
Oh, 100%,
but
100%.
what I but you're 100% right. And I think today, especially from a male perspective in Western societies that I see, you see a lot of feminized men, right? And
Yeah.
it's becoming very more and more prominent. And I think what it's coming down to is you know there's this rise of the so-called toxic masculinity and the rise of feminist movements, which is fantastic, which means for equality. That's what the root of it was supposed to be about,
Mhm.
right? But I think a lot of times too, unconsciously, we're unaware of what's going on with the social engineering of things. So
Yeah.
how do we bring this into perspective? So if you could share a hack to give to some women who are in relationships and who are doing this to their partners, their boyfriends, their husbands, and they're shaming them, putting them down in public, whether it's at restaurants, at family functions, or maybe even in private.
Mhm.
And I think really what it comes down to in a relationship, it's about building people up,
Yeah.
not building people down. So how do you constructively communicate from a place of love, of growth, of um, and just say, what are some really good communication skills that women could do for their men to build them up?
And the first thing I need to say is, because I definitely think it's a generational thing. If you've heard your parents treat your father or mother a certain way, and then you watch them as they get into relationships and they tend to do the same thing. And we talked about this in the video, where what you have grown up with becomes your normal,
Yeah.
right? So I think people need to understand, is it really normal to treat the person you claim to love this way? Because that's where the whole reprogramming has to come into play. Because really and truly, the hack the hack essentially has nothing to well, I mean, it can have the partner, like, actually, like you said before, putting a boundary towards that. Also, I think it's the person understanding why they're doing that to the person that they claim to love.
But
You
in
know,
order to do that, they have to be conscious of it.
it has to be a
So,
conscious,
so what could be that first hack that someone could do if you're a female? What's that first process before it happens?
I honestly think, as a female, in order for another female to understand what's happening, someone has to share or bring it to light to them that they're actually doing it, to be quite honest. So many times I see women do it and they think nothing of it. And, I'm very close with my girlfriends, and I have, you know, come out and been like, you know what? Like, I've heard you say this, da, 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 da. And they never really understood until someone told them. So I think the conscious part is being aware, but when you're not aware, how do you become aware? And I think the people that love you the most need to make some people aware of their actual detrimental effects to this relationship.
So maybe one of the hacks could be, if someone's bringing this to your attention, maybe you just need to take a couple deep breaths and say, okay,
Yeah.
what's really going on here?
Yeah.
Right.
And
So awareness, right?
it has to be
Yeah.
awareness, because I'm honestly going to say that I honestly think it's more women that degrade their men in front of large groups. And I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot of dissatisfaction that's attached to it. There's a lot of stress that's attached to it. There's a lot of inadequacies that are attached to it. But it's understanding why. And I think as a female, when you don't look up to your man, that tends to happen.
But let's face it also, there's so many things in life that we were brought up with, which is hold the door for a woman, open her car door. What are the things that women were taught on how to treat a man and do for a man?
Yeah.
It's not as prominent. So maybe why don't you come up with some of your own hacks? So if you're noticing this is something prominent, it's totally and completely unacceptable.
It's
I mean,
unacceptable.
if it's humor and you're joking around, that's fine. But if you're degrading them and you think it's a joke, it's not.
It's not.
It's not cool. So what is a step-by-step plan that somebody could do to hack that destructive and toxic behavior?
Oh boy. In all honesty, I think that, because I know for me, it took me a long time to reprogram, and it didn't just take me to do it. It took some outside sources to do it, and it took a willingness to do it. So for me to say, whoever's watching this, if you know you're the type of person that will degrade your partner in front of other people, you need to, as Brendan Burchard says, take 2 beats. Instead of putting your partner down, how can you lift them up? What could you say instead? And it's truthfully,
That's awesome.
it's a retraining. It has to be a retraining. But it also has to be a conscious awareness on their part, because they don't even realize, half the time they don't even realize that they're doing it. They just do it. They shame endlessly, and they think it's okay. One, because the partner lets them get away with it, first and foremost. And if they had enough self-confidence and awareness and um, just presence within the relationship, then they wouldn't tolerate it, nor would their partner do it.
I agree. And I don't mean to stop you on that, but if you really think about it, as men, it's ingrained in us on how to treat a woman. But I think this is part of the hack is there's not that blueprint for the majority of women and on the precedence of like how they were supposed to treat a man. You know what I mean? Like it's so prominent for us of all these things that, we're supposed to do. But I think maybe these things happen if you're very conscious of it, that it's happening on a grander scale. Maybe that consciousness needs to be there. Maybe there needs to be that in place. So what are some of the key things that can come into play to make the shift?
So let me ask you this. So I will talk about that too, but let me ask you this. So like you said before, we've had 2 ends of the spectrums.
Yep.
And the middle, all of it, creating balance is equality, equity, that kind of stuff. So the shift is definitely towards one end of the spectrum at this point. And you're saying, okay, men are being taught how to treat women, right? Essentially.
I said we weren't.
Oh,
sorry. We were. Yes.
Yes, you were.
Yeah. Yes.
So where's the disconnect in women understanding how to treat their man? Right? So I think maybe there needs to be that brought back, because the equality scale is definitely a little bit tipped. And like I said in another video, you definitely teach people how to treat you. And you don't have to give your best to everybody. people have to be deserving of the best part of you. So understanding that if you are a man or if you are a woman, people have to check off that list, and if they're not, you don't have to be that best version of yourself or put everything out there for everybody. People have to earn it, essentially. Um, so I think for myself, I know that it's important to me understanding how to create that balance within a relationship. And I am willing to offer that to my female friends who are willing to listen.
So then
And
maybe share the perspective of what you can do to make people aware. Like, say there's people that are watching that have friends or relatives who are doing these things with their partners.
yes.
What are things that people could do, like you, who are making people aware, to
Mhm.
help them see what the behavior is and what's not acceptable, and things that they can maybe make them more aware of and conscious of, and things that they
Yeah.
can do differently?
Here's the thing. And I think this is just like the need of women and men. If you look up to your partner, you will do things to satisfy them. So I think whether you're the female or the male, continue to have that ambition, continue to have that drive within the relationship, continue to be the best version of yourself within that relationship, continue to strive to be greater than you were yesterday, whether it's taking up a hobby, whether it's, you know, doing something new or an inventive. Because the minute there's any stagnation or the scale goes down, and I'm sorry, but there's always attraction within a relationship. Um, and that has to be apparent too. Make your partner want you and desire you. And as a female, a lot of that is so important. I want to know that my man is being the best version he can be. And that forces me to be the best version I can be.
Okay, so from a female perspective, let's say you
Yes.
were somebody who did the shaming thing, but now you're
Okay.
conscious of it and you're trying to make your man the best version of himself.
Right.
What are the things that you can do to make that happen?
Well, I think ultimately, like you said before, it's reversing what you would normally say with something else, getting out of that fear mindset of what if I just surrender in this moment to what actually would make me feel good and my partner feel good. So, in instance, if you are doing the shaming with your partner and you know that you do it, you definitely remove yourself from what you would normally say or do and you flip it to build them up.
So what are some things that they could say instead?
It could be anything little throughout the day. It's even a text message when they're not even expecting it, like, babe, I hope you have a great day. Because I'm sure for a lot of them, that doesn't happen. And that would light their man up
But I
like
think also what
tenfold.
light a man up is, I know for myself, when my wife says things positive about things that I've done or that I've done in a relationship or that I've done for her in front of other people, right? So in that perspective, what are, like, because people need ideas. It's almost
And you
like,
know what? I'm gonna tell you another
so
thing.
what are some of those things?
Apologize for your behavior. That's a huge one.
So
And
that's if you so that's if you chose the toxic behavior. But I'm
yeah,
saying you haven't chosen that behavior. You're choosing this new path. So
yes.
what are some of the things instead that you can say to build that person up? And let's talk about it in a public perspective.
Okay, so from my perspective, my man is definitely always on a mission, and I always ask about how something went throughout the day. Like, let me know how that meeting went. I hope you have a great conference, or just understanding that no matter what, he has your support. And that is huge. Like, he doesn't want to talk about it. Like, he doesn't want to sit there and communicate about it. But understanding that when and if he does need to talk to me about it, he knows that I am willing to listen. Um, and a lot of you may think that men don't want affection. They do. They probably want more affection than females do, and just simple gestures throughout the day, honestly. Like, what man doesn't want their woman to pull them close and just be like, "Have a great day, babe," and give them a kiss
So
goodbye?
what is something that somebody could do to show some love in a public setting with friends at a dinner, at a table? What are some things that they can say or do? Maybe it's something that didn't work or something that they overcame or the gym or weight loss. Like what are give people maybe some ideas of things that they can say in public that would make their partner feel alive and supportive
Mhm.
and just really feel like they have their back.
I don't think, necessarily that people have to say much. I think it's just people can tell by, um, body language, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And simple things like holding their hand, getting closer, um, being near them when normally you wouldn't be. If they're having a conversation with someone and normally you would be with the girls, maybe invite yourself in that conversation and just go there for a quick second and then leave. Truthfully, I know for me, my man doesn't need me to sit there and be like, "Oh babe, like you're amazing in front of their friends." Like that's not that's not what he wants nor does he need. But he does need to know that his woman will stand beside him. So, I mean, it's great and all, like if you're having a conversation and being like, yeah, in that moment I was very proud of him, like he did such and such, or, that kind of thing. But ultimately, if your woman can just stand beside you in a room full of people knowing that her eyes are only for him, like that means the world, truthfully.
Yeah. So
So,
I think maybe a hack in when it comes
women,
to
when it comes to women,
yeah.
it's different.
Oh, absolutely.
There
It is.
might be a little bit more that I would need
Yeah.
than what he would need, obviously, right? But
Yeah.
I know for a male's perspective, just knowing that their woman has their back through thick and thin is surmountable. It's immeasurable.
And a woman that builds them up, doesn't break them down,
That's
100%.
it.
Now you have to remember too, there's different sorts of people. If you
Yeah.
have a confident man that's got his life together, he might not need that. But if
Mhm.
you some have a man who, has a lower self-esteem or is working on themselves, or maybe you're in their 20s and you just finished university and college, you're just getting married, just getting your life
Yeah.
started. You want to boost him,
Mhm.
praise him
Oh, of
often, daily,
course.
in public,
Of
right?
course.
So there's so many different facets of, how do you create a communication hack when it comes to shaming in public? Well, if you want to set your man on fire, exploit his goodness in front of
Yeah.
everybody and anyone as often as you possibly can.
But it has to come out
It
authentically.
has to be authentically. And I
Can't
think,
be fake.
but it's just like gratitude. You can't fake gratitude.
No.
In order to feel it, you truly have to feel something that you're
Yeah.
blessed about in your life. It's the same thing with your partner,
Yeah.
right?
So we have a question here. I don't know if you can read
Yep.
that, Sam.
Yeah, I
Do you
can. Yep.
do you see it?
Yep.
So it says, what about when the other person can't communicate because she doesn't have the ability for the introspection of their own feelings? Okay. So when they're unable to see, this is hard too, right? When people are very introspective and inverted, um, how do you deal with that?
So I think, like anything in life and like anyone in life, you really have to understand someone's nature first and foremost.
Yeah.
You never treat everybody the same. The way you want to be communicated to is going to be completely different than what somebody else is going to need. So, in your perspective, if I was in your shoes, in your relationship, here's what I would do is really try to understand the things that she enjoys doing and that make her really feel safe and comfortable and open. Maybe you set the tone for having those conversations by being really intelligent, by setting the environment to have
Hmm.
that form of communication. So
Hmm.
what I would do, number one, is I would set up the environment for the proper communication. So how am I going to get her to open up? Well, you know what? Maybe there's some things I can take her to a restaurant. Maybe we can go for a walk. Whatever it might be, you know the things that your partner is going to like. And the second thing is really try to understand them. Maybe you've tried to use all the tools you have in trying to communicate and it's not working. And maybe you just allow yourself to be vulnerable, saying, look, you know what? I love you. And I feel like I'm trying everything that I possibly can to try to work on communicating with you. And I don't feel like I have anything else left.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to serve you, to help you, to really find a way to break through in this communication barrier that we have? Because I really love you and I really want to make this relationship so much better than what it is.
Yeah.
Right? Try to find a way to connect to their heart, you know?
Yeah. I think too, people need to understand that communication is a learned behavior. I mean,
Yes.
we all can do it, but it's all different. People, it's if you grew up in a family where, nobody talked to each other, how do you think that person's going to learn how to communicate? Right?
And
Or
this person's a female,
I'm not quite sure.
because she doesn't
Oh,
have the
yes.
ability. So
Yes.
here's a red flag. Most women don't have a problem communicating how they feel,
Hmm.
unless there's a wounded little girl.
Hmm.
So what you have to do is, if that is the case, like maybe there was some trauma in her life and maybe you know or you don't know, is really make sure that she feels safe to open up. Maybe she's had a man in her life, whether it was a father, a brother, someone in her life who has done something that's made her felt very conscious, or has done some things that has crossed the line where she doesn't feel safe opening up. You really have to get into the dynamic of like, what are some of the reasons that could be causing her not to open up? It is not natural for a woman who is feminine and strong in her nature to not communicate. Women love communicating. By their own nature, they must communicate, because back in the day when we used to live in caves, they were the gatherer, we were the hunter. And we came back from hunting, they needed to give us a report of all the things that she did that day, where the water was, where the berry was, where all the things were, because if something happened to her, we needed to know as men where everything was so the family didn't die. So if she's not in her nature by being openly expressive, being very confident in herself, by communicating how she feels, and I would say maybe something has happened in her life that has caused her to feel this way.
Yeah.
So you really need to get down into the root.
Yeah.
So rule number one is really understand, if you've tried everything you've tried, you're doing a great job. The second thing is start going on YouTube, and if you want some coaching, we can coach you, or you can send us an email address if you need some help. But one key thing is, if she is wounded and she is fearful, just set the tone, set that environment where she feels safe, and she can be vulnerable enough to open up to you, because it's not that you're trying to pry something out of her, but because you love her, you want to know that you're there to serve her, to protect her as her husband, as her boyfriend.
And I can't tell you how many times, like I've heard this in the past little while, of women, honestly, if they are in a relationship and they truly love their man and are in it for all the right reasons, because I know that there are some people in relationships not for the right reason. There's nothing more than a woman wants than to know that she is safe. Nothing more, you know? So I totally agree with Sam. Just create that safe environment. Maybe maybe if you've noticed a pattern in your approaches that have not worked, try something different. Try something different, because it never hurts to try, especially if you do want to make this work and tap into what she's actually feeling. She's kind of hinting to you that what approaches you have done haven't worked.
Absolutely. And you hit it
You
right
know?
on the nose. Yeah.
So try something different, like me, shutting down didn't work. Clearly didn't work. I wasn't getting what I wanted. So I had to try something different, and it started working, and it started progressing into me tapping into that feminine who now can express pretty much anything. um, but rightfully so. So I agree with Sam. Normally women who are in their feminine nature, part of that femininity is to be expressive and to, you know, tap into something that feels natural to them, So I agree with Sam 100%.
So should we wrap this up?
I think we should. Please do not forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You will get notified of our future broadcasts. And the more we serve you, hopefully, it can shed some light on some things that not only we have dealt with, but you are going through as well. So, and you're not alone. Nobody is ever alone. There's always people out there that are dealing with the same things or want to share maybe some things that have been positive, because we don't always have to look at the negative. Um, but it's always good to share, just to know that you're not alone, and that taking a risk, I'm not going to use the word vulnerability. When you take a risk, you put yourself out there, and you just never know who is going to get something from what you're about to share.
That's right.
So, on that note, thanks everybody, and we will see you next week.
And like I always say to my kids at the end of the night, if you are going to dream today, make sure you dream big.
Perfect. See you, Sam.
See ya. Bye.